We are a future urban mobility and post-carbon urbanism think tank. We are located in Vienna and Beijing. And we have evolved from being funded in 2010 in Beijing, China, as China's first bicycle advocacy group, bicycle advocacy NGO. We have evolved via doing urban research into Chinese cycling cultures, defining concepts such as bicycle livelihoods, for example, the temporary use of public spaces with pedal-powered vehicles, or looking into the history of China's unique bicycle cultures, looking at Beijing in the 1980s, where at the stage of what we call peak bicycle urbanism, where you had more than 2 million people cycling every day back and forth to work, so a real cycling city of an unprecedented scale, which made us believe and convinced that we can build cities with the concept of bicycle urbanism. So with projects like that, we have involved into a small think tank group that is interested in future urban mobility and post-carbon urbanism. And nowadays we are engaged in doing urban research, advocacy, teaching, curation, and design on various scales with partners in different projects. Mainly in Vienna, but also in China and in several projects also in Latin America. When we look at the World Urban Campaign, of which we become a partner, we see this as an interesting partner for us because we are a small group that develops ideas which can be applied and adapted or tried out in other places around the world. So we are really interested in knowledge sharing, knowledge adaptation. Back a few years ago, we called it bicycle cultural sharing. By now, we create strategies for post-carbon urbanism. I would say, like we defined in this project here at Futurama Redux. So the World Urban Campaign for us is a vessel to reach new people and to reach new partners for strategic projects. So partners that are interested in urban innovation, in creating new ways of thinking and co-creation with established urban administration or policy forming bodies. What we can bring to the World Urban Campaign is a small group of highly dedicated people that develop specific ideas, new tools for creating urban innovation, and kind of thinking out of the box and always being approached to be a partner in future projects.
Post-carbon transition is not just a matter of replacing one fuel source with another. It's not a matter of we had fossil fuels and then we bring in renewables and continue life as normal. There are some major transitions that are bound to take place. Path dependencies that our embrace and then later sort of dependence on fossil fuels have created. Physical infrastructure, systemic institutional infrastructure, psychological, mental infrastructure. We've been sort of conditioned to think that since fossil fuel energy provides seemingly infinite surplus energy, that we live in an infinite world, and of course it's not the case. With post-carbon transition, then it's beginning to think about the whole way that we live, the way that we build cities, the way that we structure our economies and our socio-political systems within constraints rather than sort of limitless surplus energy. This is one of the things we began to think about within Smarter Than Car when looking at future urban mobility, realizing that the future is not likely to be one of limitless energy surplus. In a situation of declining energy, of energy descent, what does that mean for our mobility, not only urban mobility, but mobility in terms of larger systems? So we were invited last year by Vienna Design Week to participate in a thematic section on future urban mobility, and we decided rather than to simply just design a solution and say here is the future of urban mobility, to look at it more as a process. Our starting point was the Futurama exhibit from the World's Fair in New York in 1939, This was a completely radical vision that sought to ameliorate many of the problems that were going on in cities. In the 1920s, you had a complete disaster, a car-based disaster in US cities, as cities had not been designed for the car, but now the car was everywhere. And they were trying to figure out, how do we accommodate this? So in 1939, you basically had the first comprehensive vision developed by Norman Bell Geddes for General Motors. And he presented it in this huge exhibition. It was physical and immersive, and it felt like a ride into the future. And with this huge exhibit, you saw what the city of the future in 1960, so 21 years after the exhibition, would look like. If we redesigned our whole world for cars, how would this change? How this would solve all of our problems? We could live in the country and work in the city. We could have constant economic growth and stability, all these things that were, of course, extremely important to people at the time. We implemented that vision and are still implementing it in many cities around the world, only to discover that it doesn't actually make good on many of the promises it made. It doesn't necessarily make us happier, healthier, better. Economic growth is not something that can continue infinitely. We have 1.1 billion cars on the planet now. There are many consequences of this that we're having to now sort of unravel. With this exhibition, we wanted to take that as a starting point and say, if we were to do a Futurama now, a Futurama Redux for a post-carbon world, for a post-carbon city, what would that be? And we felt like it wouldn't be just presenting a solution. It would be more about the process of trying to ask some of the fundamental questions. What are the basic principles and characteristics of a post-carbon world? How do those basic principles shape societal worldviews? How do those worldviews manifest into urban structure and fabric and systems and social practices? And how do you plan for these sorts of futures? Is it just one expert who says, here's the future, you're welcome? Or is it something more participatory, more engaging, to bring a variety of mindsets and ideas to the table to maybe point out some of the blind spots that we weren't even aware of? So what we did with this exhibition was to take the year 2050 and to do a backcasting project, basically taking Smart City Vienna, its basic principles, projecting them forward to 2050 and playing a best case scenario. What if Vienna became the model post-carbon city for the year 2050? What would be the lessons that we would have learned in the 35 years from now until then that would inform post-carbon urbanity, post-carbon mobility?